You're listening to Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez.
Thank you so much for joining us. We continue our drive home. You know, we've talked about ranked choice of voting quite a bit on this show, and I'm pretty passionate about it. When I'm at the Jefferson Park Sunday Market, I'm always excited when I see the FairVote Illinois table on the Parkway. And let's talk a little bit, first of all. Last Tuesday, Wisconsin Democrats picked a nominee for governor. David Crowley beat Francesca Hong by 3,783 votes out of nearly 800,000 cast, which is about a half a percentage point. And I think that the thing is, on that same ballot, 68,343 votes went to candidates who had already quit the state race. So it was a lot of chaos going on in that race, and which means that there were people who had no say in the actual choice. Part of that was because people actually dropped out of the race after ballots had already been sent out. But I do want to talk about ranked choice voting with our friends from FairVote Illinois, and with this case, this particular example, on how things might have been different had there been ranked choice voting. We're talking to Dan Ashurst. Am I saying your name correctly? I asked you right before we started, and I just want to make sure. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm
good. So let's talk about that. Like, you know, what kind of an impact can it have in a race that's so close, like the one in Wisconsin, where you have two candidates that drop out, one that drops out and comes back in? I mean, there was a lot going on, which...
So in a race like Wisconsin's, it's a perfect example of why we advocate for ranked choice voting. When a voter votes for a candidate that drops out of the race by the time election day rolls around, we want those voters to be able to express a second choice.
I think that's one of the great examples, is that if something, God forbid, happens along the way before the actual election day, now your vote, then, so folks know what that would have happened. Let's say they voted for Sarah Rodriguez in a mail-in ballot, but they chose Francesca Hong as the number 2 candidate, right? Now their vote counts. Yeah,
so their vote could transfer very easily from their first choice to their second choice if their first choice is unable to win. And that's just ultimately a more democratic system. And as you mentioned, I think it's quite a good many voters, like 96,000 voters voted for candidates that were not in the top 2. And as you said, 68,000 voting for candidates that had dropped out. They weren't even in the race anymore. So putting those together, we want voters to be able to have a second choice and make their vote count to the highest extent that it can.
Is that what's considered zombie votes?
Yeah, so a zombie vote would be those 68,000, those candidates voters who voted for candidates that have dropped out by the time election day rolls around.
And I don't even really think about how often it happens. So for an example, I ran for office in 2020, and like 2 weeks before election day, I've never told this story on the air ever. Somebody who was working for the incumbent's office, who was working on her campaign, desperately came to my house, desperately asking me to drop out of the race because she was such a terrible person and they felt that if I dropped out, then the third candidate would have a chance, right? Yeah. And I don't know. And here's the thing, just so you know, I only came within 4 points in a 3-way race, right? And so she didn't even get 50%. But at any rate, I remember sitting there thinking, like, what a wild thing, first of all, to ask me. And like, if people actually do that, how does that work for people who already voted, for the amount of money that you already spent on a campaign, for people who believe in your campaign? I mean, like, anyway, but so people do drop out. I just thought it was so bonkers.
Yeah. Ultimately, the way that we run our elections, it only really feels like the top 2 vote getters in a race are the ones that are really have any chance of winning because of the way that we tabulate our votes. So ranked choice voting would help with that, certainly that problem. But as you said, it's great too that we want voters to have more choices. Like, people shouldn't feel like they have to drop out of the race. Like, you shouldn't have been pressured to drop out, and it happens all the time. In Wisconsin, certainly it was the reason that people dropped out. A few of the candidates dropped out was because they were worried about splitting the vote. And so voters just can't vote for them at the end of the day. And if they've already casted their votes for them, then your vote gets thrown out.
Well, and to that point about splitting the vote, right? And again, coming back to the race that I was in, everyone figured, well, if there's 2 women in the race, then the guy, that's why they were trying to get me to drop out. They figured the guy could then win the race, even though ultimately he only got 22% of the vote and I got 36 or 37. But at any rate, there are conversations right now. Let's talk about the highest office in the land, that they worry that if a woman runs again, or a person of color, or a gay person, that we're not going to win. And a lot of that is because, well, one, just partly the electoral college. There's obviously this energy about, whether it's tradition or culture, all different kinds of elements play into it. But with ranked choice voting, then you have, well, this is the person I want, right? For whatever value alignment we have, and they're a woman or they're gay, and then at least the next person is as close as I can get to that. right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. One of the things that we look at in our research is how women and people of color in particular are often told that they should drop out of the race because of the way that we vote. And so our system is incentivizing it affects women and people of color more. They more often are being told, you're going to split the vote. You need to drop out of the race. There's another black candidate or another Latino candidate that's going to be able to consolidate the vote. So ranked choice voting just makes it where you don't really have to worry about that as much. More candidates can compete.
I'll tell you this much. The guy who ran in the race jumped in after petitions had already been out for, 6 or 7 weeks because he was watching and he figured, well, if a guy gets in the race, then I can win this. Like he told me the day after, literally apologized for running.
Wow.
Which was really funny to me. Just say it. But to that, it's not just that they're the ones that are asked to drop out of the race. They're told not to run in the first place.
Yep.
That's I think is even more catastrophic.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and in places that use RCV, we've seen that women and people of color tend to have much more of a chance to compete. In particular, what always stands out to me is in New York City, after the first ever ranked choice voting election in their city council, the representation for women went from 16 city council members to 31 city council members out of 50. So it was the first time in the history of New York City that it was an all-women city council and an all-women of color city council. That's what we could have in Chicago. We could have more competitive elections, more representative elections.
Jeez. Sorry, apparently someone's calling me to tell me they don't like. It's sound like a sound effect or something. It's so loud. The other thing is that none of these candidates, when you don't have ranked choice voting, you also, like in primaries, let's say Wisconsin, nobody's getting 50%.
Yeah.
So now you don't even have a simple majority of people who want this candidate to be on the general election ballot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's actually one of the reasons that we see party officials, people often think that parties are going to tend to be against ranked choice voting. That's not necessarily true because, as you mentioned in primaries, if you're in the Democratic Party or you're in the Republican Party, you want your primary candidate to have the broadest support possible coming out of that primary so they can go compete and be effective in November. So if you have candidates winning with 40% of the vote, that's a very weak mandate to run for your party in November. Yeah. Ultimately, with ranked choice voting, you get to say, well, I received 40% of first choice votes, but I also was able to get support from people's second or third choices enough to win the election. So I have stronger voter support and a stronger Democratic mandate.
And if you have just a simple majority, plurality, right? That's the plurality of it. Then because you have, let's say, 60-70% of the people in your district or your area didn't vote for you, the people that you're most beholden to are the people with the money and the power that got you the votes that you got. That helped you get there. Yep,
that core base is really, it becomes all you really have to appeal to is the fervent. As long as you can get that 35-40%, that's good enough.
Yeah.
And that often tends to incentivize extremism too, because you don't actually have to convince a majority of people. You don't really have to convince independents. You just have to convince enough people to get more votes than anybody else under our current system.
And it also lends itself, of course, to that is when you say extremism is the negative campaigning. And within a political party, it also diminishes the people who are in for the right reasons that want to do the work, and now you shred them and you eliminate good candidates.
Yeah,
permanently.
It's always funny after every single primary that we have. It's funny to watch all the candidates just eviscerate each other in negative attack ads, but then right when the election's over, they completely flip and they say, "Oh well, now I'm going to support the candidate because there are Democratic." Well, that doesn't happen all the time.
I did not. Because part of that is also the person that does it needs to be held accountable for it. Who does the negative campaigning, who destroys a family or puts out stuff that. So I'll just be very honest. So I was the mailers were that I was discussing extremists who couldn't protect women in the cases of rape and incest, and I'm a survivor of childhood sexual violence. I'm a rape survivor, and that alone was what women are already told. I mean, survivors are often told that we don't believe you. You didn't tell that kind of stuff. It would be enough if it was just that traumatizing and weaponizing rape and also in this race homicide. But a woman, what got me was that. I was doing a podcast, and this young woman told me she'd been brutally raped when she was 17 years old and used to think about running for office until she saw the mailers with my face on it and said, well, if Patty can't get, if this is what they're going to do to a woman like me, I can't get in this race. So it has, an even more tentacles that reach out.
Yeah, it's horrible. I remember seeing ads in my district. I won't say which district, just not to upset anyone. But I remember seeing ads like accusing the other candidate of being supportive of ICE in the Democratic primary and being supportive of particular violence being committed by ICE. And I was really struck by that too.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Like that kind of negative campaigning, that kind of not just negative campaigning, but viciously like personally attacking each other. We don't want to incentivize that in our political system. We ultimately, anything that we can do to systematically disincentivize that, we don't want that to be a winning strategy to attack each other.
That's what I demand is why I did not support the I just didn't show up. And that's the thing. I am a loud door. I will be on doors. I will, speak at rallies, whatever. But I have no reason to get involved if someone won't take accountability for the way they act.
Yeah.
I demand that.
Yeah,
it's just a little bit of a glitch.
Yeah, it's fundamental to basic respect in the country, and it feels like the country is in many ways being pulled apart by that sort of rhetoric and that sort of language, and so we all have to do everything we can to fight back against that, especially as it just continues to get worse at the highest levels of the country.
When we come back, let's talk about how we can better communicate with folks who are skeptical and what elements of ranked choice voting can be, enhanced so that people do feel like it's safe, I think is what elements of it do lend itself to being a safe form of democracy. Let's take a break here. We're going to continue our conversation with our guest, Dan Ashurst, who is Executive Director of FairVote Illinois. You can go to fairvoteillinois.org to learn more. We'll also find out about any events coming up or how you can get involved. And if you have any questions, you can text me at 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-9278. More in a moment on WCPT 820 Heartland Signal, KKNW 1150, and of course, all of our friends tuning in digitally. We're so happy to have you here.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez.
Thank you so much for joining us. We continue our conversation here on WCPT 820 Heartland Signal and KKNW 1150 in Seattle, and of course all of our friends tuning in digitally. I was talking to, we have in studio with us, Executive Director for FairVote Illinois, Dan Ashurst. You can go to fairvoteillinois.org. Again, that's fairvoteillinois.org. I mentioned at the top of the show, I was talking to Daniel Squadron, who is one of the co-founders and president of the company that is the parent company for Heartland Signal. He's written the book, The Fourth Branch. And we were talking about ranked choice voting. He agrees it's crucial for our next steps of how we accomplish the promise of our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And he said, but there's so much skepticism. What are some of the elements of ranked choice voting that you can touch on that will soothe folks who have concerns?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we advocate for ranked choice voting in the form of it that we do is because it is a hand recountable system. So that's like the most important thing. We want people to trust the results. We want to be able to have a fully transparent process. What we don't want is having a bunch of numbers go into a computer and spit out a result. We want to be able to audit the result. So with ranked choice voting, the same rules will apply for election security. So, for example, in legislation that we're working on for local option RCV in Springfield, we are establishing that the vote data that comes out of a ranked choice voting machine has the exact same security standards as a ballot in state law. So if you trust that your ballots are being handled correctly now, you can trust that the ranked choice voting data that's coming out of these machines is also being handled with the exact same level of care.
Because I do get a listener who calls and texts, and just there are people who are just very adamant. And I mean, I guess part of me is like, clearly this isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it, Dan, right?
Yeah. It's, I always say, like, there's no perfect voting system. And but like you said, our current voting system is pretty bad. So, ranked choice voting if we're going to fix it in the next few years here, it's going to be ranked choice voting. That's the one that's got all the steam behind it.
I do want to talk about Illinois because I didn't realize that last Thursday on August 13th, a Cook County judge dismissed the Evanston ranked choice case again without prejudice. So plaintiffs can add the State Board of Election and Dominion as parties. Evanston passed ranked choice voting with 82%. I didn't even realize it was that high. Oak Park passed it with 79%. Skokie's passed it, and they both Oak Park and Skokie intend to use it in April 2027. So where does that land us right now?
Yeah. So as you said, those three cities, those are the first cities in Illinois to ever pass a ranked choice voting referendum. We were the people who played a big role in leading that. We believe that those are already legal under the Illinois Constitution. There's broad authority for cities to adopt whatever method they want for electing their officials. But we are currently working on legislation that would just make it easier for those cities to implement and would really explicitly clarify every step of the process. So we're working with clerks right now to perfect that process. The good news is it's already been used in over 50 cities in the country in the last 25 years. So there's plenty of other examples to look to of what are the best practices for securely and safely implementing ranked choice voting.
I did not realize that the Cook County clerk was standing against this. Is that right?
More or less.
The state law prohibits it.
So
is their take? The
Cook County clerk's take is that the election code currently doesn't. Well, I guess I don't want to speak for them too much. My understanding of their take is that the election code doesn't currently explicitly provide for ranked choice voting. So they say, well, how are we going to implement this if it doesn't explicitly provide for it? So there's two ways to go about that. I mean, one way is that, in Illinois, local municipalities have this broad authority to adopt it. So we would say that the county should work with those local municipalities to find a way to implement the will of the people. On the other hand, certainly we want to support clerks. We want to make it easier for clerks to implement it. So my take on it personally is that legislation would be helpful. It would be helpful for clerks, certainly. And it helps with, as you said, people's concerns about election integrity. Like, we want to make sure that everything is laid out as clearly as possible. I think there are ways to do that at the local level, but it's certainly helpful to have state standards as well.
So what is the legislative track then? I mean, I think Representative Cam Buckner's worked on this, State Senator Laura Murphy, just to name a couple off the top of my head. Where are we with has it made it out of committee in the past several years? It
has not yet made it out of committee, unfortunately.
I'm so surprised, Dan.
But I will say, I would say we are now in the best position, I think, to pass it next year than we have ever been, primarily because at FairVote Illinois, we recently led a process bringing together RCV experts to really hash out the bill, really be very, very careful about making sure that we're nailing all the different questions the clerks have. And now we're starting to, engage with clerks really early. So we've been engaging with clerks now to make sure that when the bill comes up in 2027, it's really ready to go. So I think that this time has been a lot cleaner. So I have confidence that we can get an RCV local option bill. Then again, I'm an optimistic person, but we'll see what happens.
Well, this is how we help out, which is folks can call there, and I've talked a lot about this, folks. I've told you, please, first of all, pull out your voter ID card, but your voter registration card that you get it all the time. Mm-hmm. You get it I feel like I get it every twice a year, that tells you who your state representative is, who your state senator is, who your alderman, that information, and call them, right? Say, this is something I'm interested in. Where do you stand on this, and how do I have conversation about getting across the finish line, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a form at fairvoteillinois.org/links where people can find their representative, send them an email, call their office, even just a quick 15-second phone call that's like, hey, I support ranked choice voting. I support voters having more choice and more power at the ballot box. I hope that you will vote yes on ranked choice voting legislation if it comes up next year. That always can go a long way.
Excellent. And do you have any events, or what are other ways people can get involved and support the work that you do at FairVote Illinois?
Yeah, if you go to fairvoteillinois.org, you can sign up for our email list. There's a big button that says join the movement. That will get you in the loop on if there's ever opportunities to advance ranked choice voting in Illinois, opportunities where it's particularly important to call your representative at a certain time. We'll let you know about that. We also have plenty of events at FairVote Illinois, so we'll actually be out at Oak Park. There's a big microbrew event this weekend, this Saturday, where we're going to have people ranking the different beers that they get to try at the event. That's one of our favorite things to do, rank your beers.
Yes.
So that'll be a lot of fun. That's at fairvoteillinois.org/events.
Outstanding. Again, we're so grateful to our guest, Dan Ashurst, who's the executive director of FairVote Illinois. Also, find your FairVote chapter in your area, and that's fairvoteillinois.org here in the Chicagoland area. Thank you so much, Dan. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.